All right, B, so we got a question from a gentleman. He says, how do you teach your son to be a good man when you yourself are still making mistakes?
Sure. Well, guess what? You're human. You're supposed to make mistakes. If you believe in God, Christ, then, you know, he's the only perfect being. And so he made you in his image, but we are still flawed. And so since we are flawed, we will continue to make mistakes. But as you learn from your own mistake, share it with your son. As you learn from one mistake, share it with your son. That's all I've done in my life. Like, my son knows everything, not from just watching the show and about me. The only thing he actually didn't know about me that he found out from the YouTube show here or the podcast is, he's like, man, you tried cocaine? I was like, yeah, I tried it once. It wasn't my thing, and fucking never do it again. Yeah. Outside of that, I've told him everything. Like, here's all the mistakes, even up to the most current time. Like, he's 17 now. When he was 14, so a handful of years ago, I was like, hey, son, I realized that I was being very short-tempered with you. I was being very short-tempered with you when you were 10, 11, 12 years old, 13 years old, even as early as last year, son. And dude, he had a cry and he got upset and he was like, man, it seems like Chloe always gets preferential treatment. And I was like, man, I'm so sorry. And I'm so glad that he got that off his chest. I have not been perfect, but each time I am imperfect and I can solve through my imperfection, I'll share it with my son. I'll share it on the show. Like, I feel like I'm being a father to the world through this show. And so I hope this guy doesn't feel so much pressure on himself. In the meantime, there's books that he could read. Books like Raising a Modern Day Knight, a great book on how you can first carry yourself and then pass that along to your son. Mm-hmm. Great lessons. Also from John Eldredge. I forget John Eldredge's book. It'll come to me. But John Eldredge has an amazing book. If you just look him up on Google, you'll find his book. And then the third book is from Jack Donovan, and it is The Way of Men. Like, between those three books, a dad who maybe himself didn't have a dad or a male figure, he could learn so much. Mm-hmm. He can solve it through a lot of his own problems and then become that role model and mentor to his kid and other kids around town.
Right. So the biggest thing as far as advice goes would say, give them a safe space to be able to open up to you in the first place, and then be willing to communicate and let them know about your flaws instead of trying to be perfect.
Yeah. And then if you screwed up and they call you on it, like, own up to it. Mm-hmm. You know, we forget that they're kids, but their brains are pretty sophisticated, man. They're developed. So we're like, oh, you're a kid, you know, you can't talk back to me. I'd rather you talk back to me when you're 13, 14 years old and let's solve through it than when you're 16, 17, 18, cops bring you home because you had so much anger and rage towards me, I never knew it, that you went out and acted out, and now cops are bringing you home and you're so far gone that we might have to put the kid in fucking rehab or some shit.
Right.